If your job at a healthcare facility includes disinfecting against viruses, you know prevention is the best medicine, and maintaining healthy spaces starts with a healthy cleaning routine. Grainger's world-class supply chain helps ensure you have the quality products you need when you need them, from disinfectants and cleaning supplies to personal protective equipment, so you can help deliver a clean bill of health. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Hey, former brother Evo, welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. We've got an excellent podcast for you as we're going to be joined in a few minutes by Colby Dant. He does such great work over at the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. Taking a look at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball. We're going to be chatting with him about what we've seen over the last few weeks in the transfer portal, sort of what we've gotten out there in the ACC in terms of some of their coaching hires, really the hierarchy of college basketball, where it stands right now, these impactful NBA draft decisions, and so much more. It's just very much a mixed bag chat with Colby because he's such a wealth of information, and he's going to be joining me here in a few minutes. And then in the final segment, we're going to get you guys a roundup of the news and notes we saw in college basketball over the last 24 hours. If you do have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one of two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, letters EM. Name does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is via an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. While I did not get in any Twitter/X questions today, everything is powered by Edge Boost over at Edge Boost. They're making sure that bettors are able to gain access to the funds that they need when they need them, because this is not something that runs on credit or anything like that. It's a bank account that you're able to utilize for all of your gambling related transactions. And when you go to edgeboost.bet, type in that promo code of Greg, G-R-E-G, that gives you a $1 for $1 match on your first deposit up to $25. And now let's talk with Colby, who does such an amazing job over at the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. He does the show, The College Experience, and you're able to follow him on Twitter/X at the Colby D all together. And Colby, it is great to get you aboard. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome, man. Thanks for having me.
Always good to have you aboard. And Colby joining us from lovely Columbia, by the way, which that's very unique to say the least, because, well, we don't have a lot of basketball out there in Columbia, but what we do have is a lot of NBA draft decisions that are happening right now. And just how do you take a look at this time period in college basketball? Because we sort of have a lot of the big names that have come off the board in the transfer portal, but as I've been calling it over the last few days, I feel like there might be that second wave coming once a lot of these guys make up their mind over the next week or two as to whether or not they want to stay in the draft.
It's a lot better today. I like the fact that, they can test the waters. For a long time you couldn't, but it kind of builds for high drama. We got the good news that Boogie Fland is back in college hoops. I don't think he's back at Arkansas potentially, but I was looking at just the amount of players. Now, some of these ones I feel like you think they're going to come back. I was eyeballing Miles Bird, who I had a chance to interview him at Mountain West Media Days, but I'm like, he could really benefit from more college. If anything, he started out playing well at San Diego State, but I thought as the season went along, his game kind of suffered a little bit more, especially on the offensive side of the ball. So I know the NBA draft is about potential in a lot of ways. That's why so many high schoolers have gone over the years. But that's when I expect that, we'll make the decision to return, I would assume. Also, there's just a lot of big names. Darian Williams would be one that just jumps out to mind. It's going to be fascinating if he returns. I think there's almost 20 players that we're waiting on those decisions. And I think it makes for good drama, especially because college basketball, and I know you know this, more than any other sport, I feel like when the lights go off in the offseason, the lights go off. I think this adds a wrinkle.
Yep, it certainly does. And I think that it is so important what we've got here right now, because you mentioned it in college basketball. It's really a case where it doesn't get a lot of mainstream attention. This isn't like the NFL, the NBA, or any of those sports where you've got a hot stove. And it is so important for those that are looking to be able to handicap the sport, for lack of a better term, to just keep their head in the game and to be continuing to update this, because as well as I do, trying to be able to prepare to break down 364 Division I teams, that's not going to happen overnight. And if you're tuned out in the offseason, like much of the attention is for college basketball, you're going to be way behind the 8 ball opening night.
These days, man, I know you've been doing it a while. Our show's 8 years into it, and 8 years ago was kind of easy. You kind of just be like, those guys are returning. there was a few players transferring, but not like this. Now it's like, I think it makes it harder from a handicapping point of view, but also in a way it could make you sharper if you can stay. That's why I recommend, listening to podcasts like yours, is if you can get the attention to detail on what teams are picking up who, then I think come, November 3rd, I think this year, then you'll know coming into it, you can hit the ground running a little bit from a gambling point of view, but also just as a fan. So definitely something that has been different when we started, but great to see, now. And I recommend just following up, especially if you love the sport like we do. I love, playing these things out in my head. Could this team make a run in this conference? Could this team do that? What happens if so-and-so returns? Or like I just mentioned, Miles Byrd, what happens if he returns? Does that make San Diego State the front runner in the conference as he enters the sophomore season? So yeah, a lot of intrigue.
Yep, there certainly is. As Colby Dant, who does such great work over the Sports Gambling Podcast Network, joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And I'm so glad that you mentioned that it does feel like it's much harder in this day and age, because the one thing that I will say with the transfer portal that it helps with is I always think the most difficult part of college basketball is seeing how these freshmen are going to be able to fare right away, because even with transfers, when they go from like High Point on up to the power conference level, heck, Division II to Division I, you at the very least have a sample size of college. Whereas with these freshmen, I always think that that's the most difficult handicap that I have, because it could be literally anyone. And with regards to some of these high schools as well, the difference between level 5A out there in Wisconsin versus like 7A, it could be a miles apart with regards to the level of talent as well. And I always think that that's just such an intriguing and such a difficult thing to do.
I think it's gotten harder because I think the microscope has gone more to the transfer portal. In a way, it could benefit the mid-majors a little bit more, just if they're sharp with their high school recruiting. Now, it doesn't mean that they'll be landing the 7'3" guy in that everyone's raving about, but I do think there's more opportunity in a way for just all schools to pick up talent, because it's almost like overload. Like, imagine if you're the head coach of a team, you're telling your assistants and your staff, saying, hey, break down the tape. Let's get out there, but there's over 1,000 guys in the portal. You're breaking down that. You're breaking down a high school tape. There's so many high school players. The sport's never been played more in the history of the world. So there's just an edge I believe you can find. Now, retaining those players, if you are a coach of a mid-major, that's the challenge, but yeah, I would say, high school has been, and how about JUCO? JUCO was one that I can remember, growing up in the late 80s and early 90s, where you would get some of the best players in the country in the JUCO ranks. I almost feel like that could be a diamond in the rough now as the JUCO ranks, because it's even hard to find tape. Yeah. I mean, for us, unless you're a coach contacting the university for the tape, if you're just like, out there on YouTube searching for it, sometimes it can be a challenge. I know just from last season's breakdowns in the preseason, there were certain teams where they were excited about bringing in a JUCO, and I was trying to find any tape, and it was like, okay, I could see him in a gym dunking or shooting free throws by himself, but I didn't see any actual game tapes. That's another thing, though. JUCO, I would say, and I would ask you this question too, is be like, is that an area potentially being slept on? Because for so many years, hell, I mean, Larry Johnson, I'm dating myself here, but was the first pick of the draft. That was a JUCO guy. There was a lot of JUCO guys over the years, and I wonder if that perhaps is a diamond in the rough.
Yep, I think that it certainly can be. Like Chad Baker-Mazara is on his 500th year of college basketball. He was a junior college guy a few years ago as well, and I think that leads to something interesting as well, because there are some teams that they do a really good job with regards to bringing guys from the junior college level. Like, we're going to have Abdul Bashir going on over to Auburn. I mentioned how they were able to find Chad Baker-Mazara and how good that was able to pan out for them. I know that over the years we saw Iona when Slick Rick Pitino was over there. They were doing a good job with that as well, and there are just some programs that it seems like they get it right, and then there are others that they take a swing and they just take a big giant miss.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying, is like your scouting department almost becomes such a key factor these days. I would mention it for any of the sport. The portal's gone crazy. Like, right now, we're doing the college baseball experience with a lot of the portal has been crazy in that sport too. And obviously football as well. And basketball, I think this was the biggest year ever. Scouting department's more important than ever. You can really find some diamonds in the rough. And I mean, look at the national champs with Florida. Bringing in Walter Clayton Jr., several other guys that weren't necessarily the most sexy, transfers at the time, but boy, did they pay off.
Yep, no question about it. And I think that that's one of the big difficulties of being able to gauge things in this day and age, as well as you mentioned it. Sometimes when you see a guy who averages like 20 points per game at insert school here, he goes to a new school and he's not able to get out there on the floor. He's averaging like 2 points per contest. And then there are others of these guys where it's like, oh, at VCU, he's averaging 8 points per game. And guess what? He's averaging more points per game at the power conference level than he was at VCU as well. And I think that that's just so tricky to be able to gauge because fit is everything, and you just don't know what the locker room chemistry is unless you've got very, very good inside info that pretty much nobody has.
Yeah, 100%. Coaching matters even more. Scouting matters even more. I think it's harder on these coaches. You hear them complain. It doesn't matter the sport, baseball, basketball, football. It's about time they earn those contracts because some of those contracts have been insane over the years. So, yeah, I mean, it matters. It's a fascinating day and age. And in many regards, I like it. And some I don't like it. But I know that this tournament went chalk, but I think it's actually better for the sport. A lot of these things. Now, you sure you'd like some rules to help it. I like the fact you got to go out and scout. I like the fact that if you have a weakness on your team, you can address it in the offseason. Before, you're only addressing it was bringing in freshmen, which, if you're not getting, especially if you're a mid-major, I think it would be a lot harder to just hit a home run on a freshman. Now you can go out and address it and bring in, St. Francis's point guard or whoever. I think that's a good thing for the sport overall.
Yep, I'm right there with you. As Colby Dant, who does such amazing work over the Sports Gambling Podcast Network, joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, and I think that leads to this as well, because now we've seen a lot of the bigger names come off the board in college basketball. Obviously, have a few of those draft decisions, and those are going to be very impactful, but now, as these rosters are starting to come into form, who's a few teams that you just have been identifying over the last few weeks that you think, man, they might be flying a little bit under the radar, and you just really like the offseason that they've had, and maybe you're not getting the love that they deserve from a lot of those that cover the sport all 12 months out of the year?
I'm curious. I've seen some preseason top 25 polls, and none of them have this team in there. But I think, like you kind of alluded to, D2 players, continuity is valuable in this day and age. I think that's one of the things I think you should be trying to do. Obviously you want to be talented, but McCollum leaving Drake, bringing his whole roster from the D2 ranks up to Drake, making their first tournament since the 70s, and now getting the job at Iowa. What did he bring? Like 5 or 6 of his transfers, I feel like, with them. Obviously Bennett Sturt's the big one there. And then, just a slew of the other guys too. I am fascinated by that. And then he ended up getting Housen from Kansas State, who I think is an interesting piece that could really fit there. So that's one that's really caught my eye, where I wonder, it's fascinating. We saw them go from D2 to the Missouri Valley and do it. Barely lost any games in the regular season. Now, can you do it to the Big Ten? A fascinating thing, but I do think that continuity will pay off. Now, I'm not saying they're going to be a national championship contender, but I do think this could be a team that, probably won't be ranked in the top 25 if I had to guess. That could be a top 25 team when we're talking in January next year. You're saying, hey, this Iowa team's been pretty good. So I'm fascinated by seeing that. That's one team that's really caught my eye. To me, in football, watching a triple option team or something like Army go up against, it's just fascinating to me because these athletes were told you weren't good enough to play D1, let alone, in the Big Ten now. So that's one I'm probably going to be watching every single Iowa game. And I think they are flying under the radar a little bit.
Yep, I'm right there with you. And I think that the Big Ten in general is interesting because hard to look away from Purdue. Purdue has been able to retain a lot of guys. They bring in Oscar Clough to be able to shore up what was their biggest weakness, which was the rebounding last season and really that 2-point defense. So I think that they are going to be tremendous in the conference. But outside of Purdue, and I like what I've seen out of Michigan as well, I think that they're going to be rock solid. I think that UCLA is going to be as well. But I think that there's a big giant middle out there in the Big Ten. And I feel like the conference as a whole, it just really got better this offseason with the coaching hires that they made and so many of these programs just getting with the times of college basketball, because for the longest of time, I really called out the Big Ten for not having a lot of programs utilizing the transfer portal. Now all these programs are very much investing in it.
Yeah, and it's refreshing, I think, if you're a Big Ten fan. I know you're from Wisconsin, so I think that, because to me, it was almost like a lot of those teams lacked athleticism to me, and it was like, why would you not go out? It wasn't that long ago. I remember some of these teams that, take Iowa, for example. I can remember a time in the late 80s and early 90s where they were actually like really good. Now, they were really good a few years ago with Garza, but they still lacked athleticism. It was almost puzzling. I was like, why don't they ever try to get an athlete? It is great to see just in general, and I do like those coaching hires. I'll tell you another team, though, that has me wonder. Clemson is one that I think in the portal has brought in some guys that really could be an interesting watch next year, especially knowing Duke's reloading, and I'm sure Duke will be great. Carolina, I don't even know. I think they're going to be better, but Clemson is one. Getting Nick Davidson, who I thought he should have left Nevada the year prior. I really like his game, and I think he fits so well at Clemson. Getting R.J. Godfrey from Georgia, Efren Johnson from UAB. I liked a lot of the moves they did, and I think Brownell, who, it was funny, he was on the hot seat a few years ago. Then he had that, Elite Eight run. I feel like he's really found something there. He's found his stride there. I'm excited to see what they can do next year. I think that's a team flying under the radar.
Yep, absolutely. And that ACC is just so wide open as well outside of Duke, because Duke is going to be the big bad wolf once again. And I like what Louisville has done as well. I think that Louisville probably looking like either a number 2 or a number 3. Virginia's interesting as well. But I mean, those mid-tier ACC schools, if they could just get a little bit more out of them, that'd be so big for the conference, because we've seen the bubble teams over the last few seasons in the ACC not get the bids because schools like Boston College, when he was there, Kenny Payne over at Louisville, those bad teams really just dragged down the entire conference. And if they could just get some of these teams to be halfway respectable, the ACC might be able to get a come up. And I feel like their coaching hires in the offseason are doing a good job of being able to get them back to where they need to be.
But a lot of people had asked on our show, ACC, I grew up going to Maryland basketball camp, grew up in the DC area. And to me, that was the epitome of the best college basketball conference. I grew up in the heyday of that, where it felt like every single night you're watching, whether it's Coach K against Dean Smith, whether it's Gary Williams, going up against Dave Odom, or, some of these other great coaches that were in there. Bobby Crimmins had Georgia Tech rolling. So I was baffled at how bad they've been and what happened. And I think a lot of that was they didn't change with the times. They hung on to some older coaches, or if they did change with the times, they just phoned it in, which, I would say like Syracuse would be one that might be eligible for that. But I do like this new coaching hire cycle for the ACC. I don't know that it will work this year right away, but I do think they're on the right track. They're kind of waking up, realizing that, in all this crazy day and age of college sports with conference realignment, your revenue sports is so important to field a winner, especially right now. I'd say, I don't know if that will be the case in a decade, but right now you don't want to be a team left behind if there is some type of split off or something. So they got to get their ducks in order, and I think they did. Especially Will Wade to NC State, I thought was a home run. Odom to Virginia, obviously his dad coached there as well, home run. So I'm really excited specifically about those two. I'm curious about the Miami and Florida State situations, but I do like the NC State and Virginia hires. I think that's going to instantly impact the ACC.
Yep, they are going to be able to have a big impact over there. And a man that is having a big impact on this podcast is you, Colby, because you do such a tremendous job. Take a look at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball. You're dialed in, much like myself, all 12 months out of the year. So love to get people at home know it's all on tap for you. I know people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
Well, thank you, Greg. It's always a pleasure hopping on, and it's great talking college basketball in Columbia. I think I feel pretty decent saying I'm the only person in this country talking college basketball right now. I'm on Twitter, the College Basketball Experience is on Twitter at TCE on SGPN, also youtube.com/The College Experience. And I'm personally on Twitter at TheColbyD. Check out our stuff. It's always college basketball season with us, but we also have college football experience, the FCS college football experience as well, and the college baseball experience as the road to Omaha is heating up right around now. So check out our stuff. All of those come together as one on YouTube, youtube.com/The College Experience. And I appreciate you having me on the show, Greg. Always a pleasure.
It's always great to be able to have Colby aboard. His energy is just always there for this sport, and I much like myself, again, it is a long, winding road to get to the season, but he is focused. He is putting in that work to be able to make us some winners here in the college basketball season, and always love to have him aboard. Big thanks, Colby, for joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast, and coming up next, let's recap the news and notes we saw in college basketball over the last 24 hours.
If you work in quality control at a candy factory, you know strict safety regulations come with the job. It's why you partner with Grainger. Grainger helps you find the high quality and compliant products your business needs to inspect, detect, and help correct issues. And the sweetest part is, everyone gets a product that's as safe to eat as it is delicious. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. It is always a pleasure to be joined by our good friend Colby Dant, who does a tremendous job over at the Sports Gambling Podcast Network, taking a look at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball. Every single time he joins me, he lends such great insights. Did so once again today. So big thanks to Colby for joining me in the last segment. Now it is that time of the podcast. I give you a recap of the news and notes that we saw in college basketball over the last 24 hours, and I do like this pickup for Loyola Marymount, Rokas Josias. He was playing 2 seasons ago over at LaSalle, where he was averaging about 8.5 points, 5.5 rebounds per game, glued to the bench last season over at Central Florida. I think that he's going to be able to come in and he's going to be able to help out this Loyola Marymount team that has been adding a few guys via the transfer portal. It's been a bit hit or miss for them, and out there in the WCC, it's been very interesting in general. Pacific has actually done a really good job of being able to hit the portal. They've been able to bring in quite a few guys, but Josias not necessarily a guy that's going to be super versatile, light it up from three-point range or anything like that, but certainly I do think that he's going to be able to make a little bit of an imprint for the team, and we got quite a few solid players that are going to be entering into the program. Rodney Brown, who was over at Virginia Tech, Jalen Shelley, who was at USC, and then you have a couple of that with Tanner Thomas, who I really like, 6'6" combo player, who's shooting right around about 40% from three-point range over at Sacred Heart, so I do think that they're starting to form a little bit of a solid roster, though I said that in the past about this team, and then they have done absolutely nothing whatsoever. This man has decided that he is going to be going to UC Riverside. That would be Denzel Haynes, 7 points, 6.5 rebounds per game over at Coastal Carolina last season. And for UC Riverside, it's been a little bit slow going for them, mainly because they don't have their main head coach anymore, as you've had Mike Magpeo decide that he is going to be leaving UC Riverside. But that said, I do think that this new coaching regime is going to do a nice job in general. Being able to get a guy like this down low, I think, is really going to be able to elevate a team that last year they were a little bit hit or miss on the glass. They were much more based around the backcourt, but this year, I do think that they're going to be addressing a little bit more in terms of being able to glass, be able to form a rough and tumble identity, for lack of a better term, as you take a look at UC Riverside, and they've had a little bit of a slow go of it in terms of adding transfers in the portal, but now they're starting to get on the board for a few. They added a few days ago as well someone that I really like, and Dylan Godfrey coming on over from Canisius, so I do think that things are starting to form a little bit more on their front. This team is starting to be able to rise up a little bit as well. You've got Armani Ziegler, who was over at St. Peter's last season, average about 11 points per game, 6 boards. He's able to give you a steal and per contest. He has decided that he is going to be going to Ball State, and for Ball State, it certainly has been an interesting run of things for them over the last few weeks, as the MAC in general just has not added a lot of pieces via the transfer portal, so we'll see if they're able to get on the board for a few more sooner rather than later. But Armani Ziegler are part of a St. Peter's team that every single year they're pretty good with regards to defensive front. For Ziegler last season, was able to throw in there about a 30% three-point shooting percentage. Was much better 2 seasons ago when he was shooting more than that year, but about 35% from three-point range. But at 6'4", relatively good versatility, does a nice job on the defensive side of things. I think that that's going to help out a Ball State team, of which that was their main kryptonite from last season. We'll see if Ball State is able to add a little bit more, as they and pretty much everyone else out there in the back just not doing a ton in terms of adding pieces. Derek Hamilton, he is added to the Campbell Fighting Camels, as for Campbell, they have been doing a nice job here in the offseason with Hamilton. About 4 points, 2 rebounds per contest, something that lights the world on fire, but going down a bit of a level, I think is going to be very helpful for him. And additionally, this is a Campbell unit that they're just absolutely stacked. They had a bit of a slow go of it, and they do lose quite a few of their pieces from this past season, but that's it for Campbell. They've done a nice job of being able to add a little bit more size than they had a season ago. That was probably their biggest weak point, and you've got Quentin Mincy, who comes on over after averaging double figures over at UMass Lowell last season, and Columby, who was able to give you about 8 or so points per contest over at Western Kentucky last season. Jeremiah Johnson, a former top 300 recruit, is going to be coming in as well. So there's a lot of good pieces of love with regards to this Campbell team, and I think that out there in the Coastal Conference, with a team like a Charleston being able to rise up, UNC Wilmington, they've done a good job of being able to add pieces as well, that they're going to be able to be rock solid this season. And this was rock solid as well. Mikhail Stevenson, he was over at Grambling this last season, where he was one of the top scorers for the team, 3.5 assists, 4.5 boards, 11 points per contest. He has decided that he is going to be going to IPFW, aka Purdue Fort Wayne, and for Fort Wayne, it's been a little bit slow for them in the transfer portal, as well as the Horizon League, as NSA had a lot of teams that have been adding a ton of pieces in the portal, but I do think that for Fort Wayne, he's going to do a nice job of just being able to fit the system in general. They've added a few guys in DeAndre 3000 Craig as well, so that backcourt is going to be very locked and loaded. And last season, they were one of the top teams in terms of being able to generate turnovers as well, so I do like what they're going to be able to bring to the table, and I think that he's going to be a very formidable force coming over from a little bit more of a defensive team. You've got Carl Marcus, who he last season was over at San Francisco. He was not able to get out there on the floor, but was a part of the Estonia FIBA under-20 team where he was able to supply the team with 10 rebounds per contest. Not a guy that at 6'8" is necessarily going to give you a whole bunch of three-point shooting, but very good on the glass. I think that he's going to be able to step in right away, be able to give this team just a nice post presence because they're going to be losing Carson Toad, who led all of college basketball in terms of rebounds per game. So they really didn't need it, and I think that that's a nice little bit of an upside gift for them. Pierre against Sensei, he last season was over at Fresno State. He was only averaging about 2.5 rebounds per game at 6'11". He's decided that he's going to be going to the Cal State Bakersfield Roadrunners, and for our Roadrunners, it is going to be interesting to see what they are able to do this season as they have a lot of moving pieces and they're always forming their identity on defense. They've also added A.J. George, who 2 seasons ago when he was over at Long Beach State was a nice double-figure scorer out there in the Big West. Dylan Smith, who was a nice double-figure scorer over at Alabama A&M, he's coming in as well. So they're adding some nice pieces, and I do like what they're forming out there. And then you got Izzy Miles, who was over at Charleston State, let's say, last season. 7.5 points, right around about a steal and a half per contest. He's decided that he's going to be going to Northwestern State. For Northwestern State, this is a unit that is looking to get a little bit stronger on defense. They're out there in a Southland Conference that in general, they've had a lot of teams just in general decide to embrace generating a bunch of turnovers. They are going to be looking to be the latest of them, as for Northwestern State last year, they were just formed around a lot of, shall we say, junior college transfers, and this is really their second big add. Omar Ogabala, who was over at Baylor last season, he's also going to be added to the program. He's a little bit more of a wild card. You know what you're getting a little bit more out of Izzy Miles, so I think that he's going to be able to step in right away, be able to give this team some good production in that backcourt, and this is a very productive add as well. How about Dr. Bradley? First name Dr., last name Bradley. Going on over to Bethune-Cookman, he last season over at Arkansas Pine Bluff, 19.5 points per contest, missed the first half of the season, but came out strong, 9.5 boards, 4.5 assists. Now, he did shoot right in the neighborhood of about 50% at the free throw line, so that's something that you do need to note. But it's a Bethune-Cookman team that they lost Zion Harmon in the transfer portal last offseason. They also lost Jacoby Heedy. Both of those guys are back after 2 seasons ago. They were averaging 14-plus points per contest. I really like what this Bethune-Cookman team has been able to do. They add a few pieces down low, and they're able to keep a lot of their guys from seasons ago that were so good on the glass. So Bethune-Cookman all of a sudden looking like a very formidable team out there in the SWAC. You've got Hassan Diop. He was last season over at Colorado. He's decided that he's going to be going to San Diego, and this is a good gift for San Diego. With Diop, I recognize he was on a Colorado team that wasn't necessarily amazing, but he was averaging 4 points, 4 boards per game out there in a power conference, and he's exactly what the San Diego team needs, because San Diego, last few seasons, they just really neglected the transfer portal, despite the fact that they've got a guy with a little bit of cachet in Steve Lavin, and now they're starting to use that once again after it went a little bit neglected. First off season he was there, they really added a lot of good pieces as well. Now they're getting back to their roots. Juan Sebastian Gorosito coming on over from Ball State is a nice get. Dominique Built-for-Tough from Southern Utah as well. So I do like these pieces that are coming in. Tunari Lane was a nice double figure scorer over at Georgia State as well. So this should be a team that's going to be able to rise up. This is now going to give them a little bit of something on the glass, and it's something that they so badly needed. And then you did see Ryan Solis. He was over at Richmond this last season. 6'10" big man. Really didn't see a lot of minutes. He's going to be going on over to Columbia. Just any sort of gets for Columbia because they're out there in the Ivy League. That's all for them. And then Caden Diggs. He last season was playing over at Old Dominion. Guy that was relatively glued to the bench, but at 6'7" as a freshman was able to give the team right around about a rebound and a half per contest. Has the ability to be able to shoot from 3-point range. He's going to be going to UMBC. For UMBC, need to get a few more pieces added in the portal because they lose so much of that backcourt from a season ago, but I do think that this is going to be a step in the right direction for them as UMBC over the last few seasons in general. They just have not been able to do the world's greatest job of being able to hit the glass, and now it looks like there's a little bit more of a concerted effort to be a bit better with that regard, as they also add in their Devin Caesar. He was over at Old Dominion this past year, so do like those pickups for UMBC, and what I absolutely love is joining you guys every single day on this podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops. If you do like hearing from this fine podcast, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcast, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one or two ways to be able to fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, Lord CM, name does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline, and the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. And big thanks once again to Colby Dant of the Sports Gambling Podcast Network for joining me in last segment. And I'm going to be coming at you guys every single day on this podcast, regular season and off season. So I'm back with you once again tomorrow. Thank you.
If you work in quality control at a candy factory, you know strict safety regulations come with the job. It's why you partner with Grainger. Grainger helps you find the high-quality and compliant products your business needs to inspect, detect, and help correct issues. And the sweetest part is, everyone gets a product that's as safe to eat as it is delicious. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.